was the leader of the synagogue. And he and his wife had this beautiful young daughter. They had called her Rebecca after one of the ladies. And her nickname was Becky. Oh, Becky was a beautiful young lady. She had long, black, curly hair, and she had the darkest, biggest eyes. She loved to be outside. She was the joy, and she was the sunshine in Jairus' life. Oh, he loved Becky. Well, that's what they called her, Becky. And Becky would go outside and she'd listen to the birds. She'd play in the meadows and run. Well, one day, when she came in, she said, "Daddy, I don't feel so good." And Jairus said, "Becky, what's wrong?" She goes, I'm just having a little bit of a hard time breathing, Daddy. I don't know. I'm just out in the field, and now I come home and like I'm starting to sweat, and I'm feeling really, really hot, and, and I'm having a hard time breathing. Well, they said, "Well, Becky, maybe you should just lay down. Maybe you had too much sun." So she said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that." So Becky went and she laid down on the bed, and her mom came in a couple of hours later and said, "Becky, are you okay?" "Mommy, I'm having a hard time breathing, and I'm feeling really, really hot and sweaty." As they watched her for the next couple of hours, they realized that instead of her skin being nice and bright, it was starting to pale, and the sparkle in her eyes was dulling over. And she kept saying, I have a hard time breathing. Well, Jairus had heard that there was this other rabbi, this other teacher. And this teacher had done all kinds of good things. Like there was once this little boy who was crippled, and this rabbi, Jesus, touched the little boy and made him all better. And Rabbi, or Jairus thought, I'm the leader of the synagogue, but this Jesus, I heard that he even fed 5,000 people with just a couple of pieces of fish and some bread. And so Jairus goes up to check on Becky. And Becky is going, honey, I can't breathe. And Jairus thought, I gotta go find this rabbi. I have to go find Jesus. And so he says, yeah, maybe he could heal her. And so he goes in and he says to Becky, Becky, I'm going to go find this man. His name is Jesus. I heard that he's healed all kinds of different people. Even he opened up the blinded eyes. I'm going to go get him. She said, Daddy, please hurry. So, Jairus, he found out that Jesus was in the next town. And it would take him just a couple hours to get there. He put on his priestly robe, and instead of just walking, he was in a hurry. And he ran as fast as he could. Yeah, he was a bit out of breath there, but finally he saw the crowd in the next town. And he was sure that's where Jesus was, because there was this rabbi and his disciples and all the people around, and they were all pushing and shoving. And Jairus comes up and he says, excuse me. And Jesus turns and says, yes, can I help you? He says, my name is Jairus. And I'm the leader of the synagogue just in the next town. But my daughter, she's 12 years old. She's our sunshine, but she was outside playing, and she came in, and she was all sweaty, and she couldn't hardly breathe. And we looked at her for the last couple of hours, and she seemed to be getting worse, and her eyes are getting a bit dull. Jesus, I heard that you could heal. I heard that you've done miracles. Jesus, would you come with me? All you have to do is just touch my little daughter. Jesus, would you come? Jesus said, yeah, I'll come. So Jairus is saying, hurry, come on, hurry, Jesus. I don't know how much time she has. Jesus started to walk, and the people were all around her. As the people were all around her, all of a sudden, Jesus stopped. And Jairus is thinking, come on, Jesus, come on, we don't have a whole lot of time. And Jesus is looking around, and he says, who touched me? His disciples said, Jesus, look around you. There's all kinds of people reaching out their hands and touching you. And you said somebody touched you? Jesus said, yeah. He said, somebody touched me, and I felt the virtue. I felt my healing power flow out of me. And Jairus is thinking, Jesus, we don't have a lot of time. Don't stop. Don't worry about her. Forget about who's touched you. Come on, you got to heal my daughter. Jesus looked around. He said, somebody touched me. Somebody had a need. And they reached out and they touched just my clothes. And then this little lady, she came up and she said, Jesus, it was me. She said, I've been sick for 12 years. I tried all kinds of doctors and specialists, and I spent all my money, and I've gotten worse, Jesus. And I thought that if I could just touch your clothes, just the bottom of your clothes, I'd be made better. Jesus turned to her and says, daughter, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. As Jesus was talking to the lady, all of a sudden, Jairus saw a couple of his fellow workers, his servants. And they said to Jairus, they said, come here. And Jairus could see that their eyes were red like they'd been crying. And Jairus comes over and they said, don't bother the master anymore. Becky, your daughter has died. Oh, Jairus thought, why didn't Jesus come? Why did that lady have to stop him? If she hadn't stopped him, maybe we would have got there. Maybe Jesus would have got there and my daughter wouldn't have died. And then Jesus spoke up. Jairus. Oh, Jesus, it's too late. My daughter's already dead. It's too late, Jesus. You didn't come. It's too late. And Jesus started to walk towards Jairus, and he said, Jairus, it's too late, Jesus. Jairus, don't be afraid. Only believe. Now I'm coming with you. And so they were walking there, and as they were walking towards the village, they could hear the people, and they were crying, and they were moaning. I mean, that's what they did. The mourners would gather, and they would wail, and they would scream, and they would cry out. As they got closer, all around Jairus' house were the people, the mourners. They were crying, oh, Becky is dead. Jesus walked into the house, and he'd taken his other disciples, Peter, James, and John. And he says, what's all of the commotion? They said, Jesus, the little girl's died. And that's why we're here. And they all started to moan and cry again. And Jesus said, she's not dead, she's just sleeping. Oh, Jewel, or Jesus, you don't know what you're talking about. We know when we see a dead person. We've seen Becky. Her eyes are closed. There's no breath in her. She's growing cold. Jesus said, she's only sleeping. She's not dead. Jesus, seriously, look it. Aren't you causing enough problems here? Saying that she's just sleeping when we know. Jesus said, all of you, out of the house now. They hadn't heard such an authoritative voice, and so they began to back away. And as they began to back away, Jesus took Jairus and his wife, Peter and James and John, up to the little bedroom, and there laying on the bed was Becky. Cold, stiff, lifeless. And Jesus walked over to that little girl, and he took her by her hand, and he said, Talitha Kumai, which means, little girl, get up. All of a sudden, her eyes began to flipper back and forth. All of a sudden, color started to come back into her cheeks, and she opened her eyes, those big, brown, beautiful eyes, and she looked up, and she had a smile. And when Jairus saw that Becky was starting to sit up, he couldn't believe it. He came running over to her, and he grabbed her in a hug. She sat up, and she says, hi, Daddy. Hi, Mommy. And Jesus says, Jairus, don't tell anybody about this. Don't say who did this. My time isn't yet. But you know what? He turned and he looked at Becky. Becky, are you hungry? She says, oh, for sure. I'm like really, really hungry. Jairus, why don't you get Becky something to eat? Jairus never forgot those words. When it looked like it was the darkest of the night, the light that Jesus spoke, the words was like light just breaking forth in the middle of the night. Don't be afraid, only believe. When it seemed like the storm was crashing all around him, those words that Jesus spoke, don't be afraid, only believe. When it seemed like the worst had taken place, the impossible had happened, Jesus' words, don't be afraid, only believe. When we can't control the circumstances, and we wonder which way we should go, and we wonder which way we should do, Jesus speaks to us, don't be afraid, only believe. Jesus speaks to us, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the storms. Don't be afraid of the circumstances. Don't be afraid of the news that's coming at us that it's all bad. Don't be afraid. Only believe. Have you ever been in a valley? That's the low place between two mountains. Sometimes the mountains are so high they're covered with snow and ice all year round. When you're up on those mountain peaks, you may have a spectacular view, but nothing grows. The valley is where you see the grass and the trees and the beautiful plants growing. But with it nestled between the two mountains, it's hard to see very far. And sometimes you feel like you are hidden in the shadows of the mountains. Sometimes when people talk about being in a valley, they mean that they are going through a bad or a difficult time. The two mountains they see looming around them are called disappointment and desperation. And they can't see how they can even get out of the valley between these two huge challenges. It feels like they are having a no good, horrible, very bad, rotten day. And it looks like it's not going to get any better. These twin mountains may even make us feel that God has left us or He no longer cares. we may even feel that our circumstances seem bigger than God. So we think He's no longer in control. Disappointment is when we're expecting something good and it never happens, or when something bad happens to us. Desperation, the larger mountain, means the disappointment is so bad that we've lost all hope. Our thinking is hurting so much that sometimes we may not make good or wise decisions. It may also lead us to do and say things that we would not normally do. Jairus was in one of these devastating valleys. Disappointment and desperation were following his every move, and desperation was definitely going to make him do something very unusual for him. Desperation drove him to seek out a local visiting rabbi. Jairus, he was the leader of the synagogue, but now he was pleading with this dusty country preacher to come and heal his daughter who was dying. If he could, Jairus would have literally picked up Jesus and carried him to his house. He thought that Jesus had to be in the house and touch his daughter with his hands in order for her to be healed. When his servants arrived and told Jairus to stop bothering the teacher, it's too late. She's dead. Disappointment shrieked at Jairus like a starving vulture. He turned away from Jesus brokenhearted. Whereas before he had hurried as fast as he could to get to Jesus, on hearing the news, he could hardly lift his foot to take another step as he trudged home towards his dead daughter and grieving wife. Both desperation and disappointment blindsided Jairus from seeing Jesus as who he truly is. He's the giver of life. He's the Son of God. Jesus refreshes and restores. He is our peace in the middle of a storm. He is our healer. When Jesus stopped Jairus, his words may have seemed harsh and cynical. Don't be afraid, only believe. Kind of late, don't you think? The servants and the mourners had already gathered to wail. Jesus told the mourners to get out of the house as the little girl was just sleeping. He refused to let their disappointment and desperation affect his thinking and his actions. Jesus touched the little girl and spoke words that returned life to her. No more disappointment. No more desperation. Now there was rejoicing and thankfulness. When disappointment and desperation overshadow your life, don't lose sight of Jesus. Put your trust in God. He is in control. God can turn your disappointments into divine appointments. He can turn your desperation into gratitude.